Hi, I'm Douglas Horvath with Five Rivers MetroParks, and today we're working in partnership with the Boonshoft Museum of Discovery along the Stillwater River as we explore how people take care of the river by monitoring it. We're involved here with a citizen science project where local citizens have been trained in using identification techniques of certain creatures and also how to take some simple tests that allow managers and planners to know how healthy the river is. So we're just going to review a few of those tools that we're going to be using, and then in the next section we're going to go down into the river and actually find some of these creatures. Now, along the Stillwater, we always want to be aware because it's always good to just be observant when you're being a scientist. So if we see owls or we see great blue herons, we might even make note about that on a little survey sheet that we'll have where we collect our data. And we're going to be looking for temperature. We want to know what the air temperature is out here, and we also want to know about water temperature. Water temperature is really interesting. Everybody take a deep breath. We love oxygen. Animals love oxygen too. Even the ones that live underwater like fish or even crawdads are breathing the air that's not bubbles, but it's dissolved into the water itself. And you've probably taken a soda bottle and seen little bubbles come out of it when you open the cap. Well, those bubbles were inside the liquid until you took the pressure off. Pressure and temperature are very similar in some ways. So when the water is cold, it has more oxygen in it. And that's why we love these wonderful trees that grow along the sides of the river, because they shade it and keep the river cooler and keep more oxygen in it and keeps it healthy. Another thing that we're going to be looking at is there's a little dot in the bottom of this tube, and there's inches over here, and this is calibrated so if the water was very muddy and you filled this tube up and you looked into it, you would not see the little dot in the bottom of it. So you would dump out some of the water until you got to a spot where you could actually see the dot. And at that point you take a reading, and so we'll take 2 of those and average them, and then we'll use a chart to help us figure out how much mud or suspension particles are in the water. Now, animals that are breathing under the water are living between rocks, and mud can be a problem. If we want to keep the river healthy, we don't want a lot of extra erosion going into the water, because the mud fills up the spaces between the rocks where the animals have their homes and they're getting oxygen. And so that really can change to a bad state a healthy river if you have lots of erosion. So be careful when you're digging around waterways, and help keep the soil under the ground with roots of plants, and that will keep it healthy. Now, another quick thing that we will be doing is we'll use a net, and we'll show you about that in a little bit, but we're going to be catching creatures, and we're looking for 3 different general kinds of creatures. Some animals, like a bird, if you've ever seen a little bird fly by, I want you to know that their little hearts are beating much faster than your heart, and they are using a little more oxygen because they're different creatures. Well, in the water, some animals need more oxygen than others to stay alive. And if the temperature goes up and the water gets too warm, or if something else happens, let's say there's a lot of extra poop or organic material, like lots and lots of leaves or yard clippings that are being dumped in the river, well, bacteria will eat that up. But as they eat it all up, those little bacteria need oxygen. And so they use up the oxygen in the water, and then there's not enough oxygen for fish. And then guess what happens to the fish? You got it. They die and float around. And so we want to try to keep the river healthy by not putting extra lawn clippings in, and also be careful of fertilizer. When fertilizer washes off of our lawns, it goes right into the river and it makes algae grow really fast, and then it dies, and then the bacteria have to eat it up. So only ever put fertilizer out when you know it's not going to rain for several days. That way it'll go into the ground and into the plants and not wash into the river. So we're going to be down in the river, and we're hoping we're going to see something like this. This is a mayfly, and you can see it has 3 little tails and gills. And if we see this animal, we know there's lots of oxygen, because as soon as the oxygen levels start to fall, these guys die. We'll also be looking for, oh, here's a really neat guy. It's called a water penny. It looks like a little tiny, I don't know, a little penny kind of stuck to the bottom of the rock. It's built so the water can be rushing over it and not get underneath of it and pry it off the rock. It's very clever how this animal has survived. Later on, this is going to change into a beetle. My friend the mayfly, which I threw away, it's going to become, here he is, he's going to become a winged animal and fly around. It may only live for a day or two as an adult, and during that time it has to find a mate and lay more eggs in the water, and then the cycle will renew itself and they'll live in the water for a year or 2. Now, if we don't find these guys, we're still going to find these guys, usually, like crawdads, because they don't need as much oxygen. Or we might also find, these are wonderful, dragonfly larvae. Oh, I love finding them, because they have a jaw on the end of a little arm, and they can stick it out and grab things and bring it up and then chew it up. They can also squirt water out of their rear end, because they bring water in over their gills, which are inside their body, and then squish it out. It helps them get oxygen, but it also allows them to jet forward, and they can grab a little creature and eat it up under the water. So they're pretty cool. They don't need as much oxygen, so we usually will see some of them even if we don't see this first class 3 of animals. Now, if all these guys, if the water's really bad and it's not very good, the only thing that will be left will be things like leeches and maybe pouch snails. Pouch snails have a lung, and they can come out of the water and get some air, and so they're crawling around in there, but they're not dependent on it. And leeches can survive in very low oxygen levels. We hope to see these guys today. They should be there, along with the crawdads and crayflies and dragonflies, and we hope we'll see all of them, which even the oxygen-loving creatures. So in the next series, we'll be down the river. We'll show you how we go look for these. If you are on a river or creek and it's not muddy and you can see the bottom real clear and it's not very deep, you might want to reach down with your hand and pick up a rock and turn it over carefully and look for some of these animals, because you can find them too, and it'll tell you right away, how is the river doing? Because the ones that love oxygen will only be there if the water is pretty clean and has enough oxygen from temperature, and also because there's not so much decomposition going on in the river, not so much bacteria eating up all the oxygen. Thank you, and we'll see you down there at the creek and the river.